If everything here works, we'll all be living longer with better quality of lifestyle in a more sustainable environment. And it's a great thing to get up every morning and try to make that a fruition.
Hey, Karl, how's it going?
We're in the frigid Northeast. I think you're out in the frigid west of New Jersey. I don't know if you want to talk about where you are.
Oh, I'm not there right now, but I just went for a day trip. But I was in New Jersey. I went to the American Dream Mall. So if no one's heard of this, it is the largest mall in America now. It used to be the Mall of America. But now in New Jersey, they outdid themselves. And this is a ginormous mall. And they have different attractions and amusement parks within. And there's an indoor water park. And so we took my son for his 4th birthday, which was yesterday. It was incredible. He's small, so he couldn't go on a lot of the big, crazy water slides. But it was fun. Yes, it was freezing outside, but we were in a tropical 82 degrees in this huge-ass water park in New Jersey.
The weather forecast, a couple of days ago, we were supposed to get the biggest snowstorm in New York City this week. Now it's barely going to be a couple of inches, but I'm going up to the Adirondacks this weekend, and up there, apparently, they got more than a foot of snow.
Oh, yeah. I have a friend near Saranac Lake, which is not too far from you, and they already had 4 feet of snow there.
Yeah, so I'll probably be about an hour from Saranac Lake.
Yeah.
But we're freezing, and in the Southern Hemisphere, they're having some of the hottest weather they've ever had. I just read that Rio is having the hottest summer they've ever had, and they've got a drought. And the city of Rio de Janeiro is 105 degrees, which is pretty warm. But they are next to the ocean, so it is a beach town. But it's like, hey, the grass is always greener, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, 105 degrees, I hate to normalize it, but I think we've hit that in New York several summers. I mean, when you get to the 100 teens, that's crazy. And I think it was like 120 in the Middle East last summer.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. In India, that has happened too, where it got into the 100 teens. I'm really worried every time it becomes summertime. And you hear that in areas where it's populated, sure, in the middle of the Sahara when there's no one. I mean, hopefully all the living organisms that are there are fine. It just gets so scary because they're like, how do people live? How are they going to survive? And what do they do? How do they escape it? If their electricity goes out and they have no air conditioning, that's a huge risk. These are things that they keep in mind. And hopefully we can come up with some more solutions that are biological in nature to help have some more climate resilience, which is something we talk about here on the podcast.
Yeah. So on the last podcast, we actually talked about some extremophiles, but really the bulk of the podcast was about space travel because we were talking to Erica De Benedictis of Pioneer Labs. And I didn't realize this, but there's a NASA mission that's about to land on the moon. It's a private-public partnership between NASA and this company, Firefly, and their Blue Ghost lander is going to land on March 2nd, which is just a couple of weeks away. And apparently it's carrying like 10 scientific instruments. And one of those instruments is going to be examining the lunar surface, the regolith. So Erica had talked about sending microbes to Mars and using the Martian soil, which is full of perchlorate, which is basically deadly to life. I emailed her because I was like, okay, well, you talked about, Erica, you talked about sending up these microbes and bringing the soil to life, but what would be the first plants that would be planted? And she said that she thought lettuce was on the list. And I was like, there are certain plants that are known for pulling nasty chemicals out of the soil, so bamboo and hemp, but there's other ones. She said bamboo has been looked at. She didn't know about hemp. So that's something I really want to look into because I'm super curious in terms of what NASA is thinking about, because you're not just going to send these microbes and then start growing tomatoes.
A lot of interesting things about this, because one is that it's not just NASA, it's commercial space flight that they're collaborating with. So I'd love to know a little bit more about Firefly. And I think that's the way we're moving forward, is with these commercial space flight partnerships, or I don't know who's actually led this. Was it NASA then asking to partner with Firefly, or did Firefly approach NASA? I think understanding that to me is very interesting. I just love learning about business relationships and how these things come about, because they could be playbooks for other people as they think about creating partnerships for their companies in different disciplines. But of course, we talk about biotech here.
Totally. Yeah.
So that's really cool. What Erica's doing is to look at the soil microbiome, how to engineer microbes to either neutralize the soil or make it work. But then you're also talking about plants coming in and neutralizing the soil too. So being able to look at the two dynamics and see if it's either neutralizing it, breaking down the perchlorate to use as almost like a feedstock to another process, whether it's being able to create a fertilizer or be able to create some type of gas, create oxygen or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But what's the end product? What's the actual life cycle of this process?
I would imagine that, again, thinking back to what she was talking about in terms of like having a 50-ton payload, which is really big, you could ship a lot of bacteria and you could be doing things simultaneously. So you could have one bacteria with a robot that's working to create the bioplastic, and then you could have other bacteria ready to deploy the moment you've got some kind of shelter in place. And those bacteria could be working on neutralizing the soil, like you said, Erum, and then preparing the soil so that you could start growing plants. And you can imagine this thing happening simultaneously. You have to be thinking about machines that can replicate themselves the way that bacteria replicate themselves. And then you must have the sequence of, okay, first we're planting bamboo to remediate, then we're planting hemp, and then we can harvest those to create something. And so you're thinking about doing these things all simultaneously and in sequences that are building the airplane as you fly it.
Yeah. So it's just creating the platform.
Exactly.
It was really cool. I love that conversation. Clearly, we can continue talking about it because it's just fascinating with everything that's going on. I will say though, lettuce though, as a first crop, maybe just to cleanse the soil, but not nutrient dense. I mean, I traveled all the way to Mars to eat lettuce. No.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. There has to be a cheeseburger waiting for me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit before we get into today's interview. There was some news about a new gene being discovered that's associated with language. And a lot of times when I am teaching or talking to people who have never really gotten in front of an audience or consider themselves not to be good at storytelling, I remind them that actually humans are wired for storytelling. We carry around this gene called FOXP2, which is related to language development. Well, scientists just discovered another language-related gene. It's called NOVA1, which is crucial for brain development, but they were doing a bunch of experiments and they also found that this was also crucial for language development. So I find that this is super interesting because this is something that we talk about at Messaging Lab. Everybody can tell a story. It just happens that we're really good at telling stories and we practice telling stories and we help our clients tell really great stories. And those stories are essential. If you don't know how to tell a good story, you're never going to raise money. You're not going to sell your product. And we love the tech as much as you do, but if the story isn't strong, it's not going to go anywhere. So I thought that was an interesting, really interesting development.
Yeah, I mean, it's the story, but being able to synthesize different aspects of a story depending on what your goals are. So if you're trying to raise money, then you have to have an economic narrative as well as a technological narrative, as well as an impact narrative. But being able to weave it together is extremely challenging. So I love telling stories. There's so many great storytellers, but they might be really good at telling a story about their weekend. Right. Versus telling a story about why technology can convert to $100 million in 2 years. That's the special sauce I think we bring to the table, but other people that are just naturally really good at it. And some of those people we've spoken with on this podcast.
Yeah, you had mentioned Oobly, who we talked to very early on, had some news. What was that?
Yeah, so Allie is actually a great example of someone who's a great storyteller on all sides. So Allie Wing is the co-founder CEO of Oobly. We had them on. They're so impressive, raised $18 million in the Series B1, and they partnered with an interesting company in the field called Ingredion. And what Oobly's doing and what Ingredion is co-developing with them is the sugar alternatives using sweet proteins. So Oobly has been championing sweet proteins. I think they're the only company that I've heard of that does this. I think there's another company that's creating proteins that are sweet in nature. I think you know them, Karl. But Oobly has really just came into our industry, really created a strong narrative, amazing product strategy, gave us the samples. They're so sweet. No pun intended. I meant they were sweet as in good people. Right. the actual product was perfectly sweetened. So I just love hearing stories of the companies that we've had on this podcast and hearing all the developments that are happening. So congratulations, Oobly.
Yeah, maybe we should get Allie back on to talk about what she's going to do with that money and what their plans are. I think it would be good to know. Mm-hmm. Because we have in our consulting talked to people who are looking for alternate sweeteners. And we're talking about really big companies that are looking to secure their supply chains.
Yeah.
So it could be an interesting conversation with her.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else do you have?
I saw another story, which I thought was so interesting, is that there's this 16-year-old founder that raised $3.5 million in seed funding to use biochar to increase crop yields while removing CO2. So I just love that this person is young, and I'm sure this person has family that's supporting them. I think her father is helping her with creating this company. It's called carbonzero.eco.
Yeah, I'm looking at her. She was a freshman in high school when she had this idea.
Yeah. It's a great company. It sounds like a great approach. Yes, we need more CO2 removed from the atmosphere to help restore our climate and make it more resilient, as we were talking at the top of this podcast. But I think this is a story of look, kids are intelligent. And then I don't want to say 16-year-old's a kid. I mean, they're like a very, very young pre-adult.
Yeah.
2 more years, she'll be an adult. But it's just incredible that we're in a place where young kids have clarity, they have mission, they have purpose, they have the energy and the ability to come up with a company. They come up with a solution that will create great impact for the environment. And you don't have to wait to go through college and get your PhD, although that is admirable and we needed to do that. But now we have access to more people where you can reach out to people more easily because we have all these social networks. We're able to show that we're authoritative in our expertise, which you and I have done very well with the podcast, I think, not to toot our own horns, but being able to create content to show that, yes, we know what we're talking about when it comes to this space, and creating a network of people that support you at any age. Teens are very social, whether it's awkward or powerful, but I just love to hear that, look, this is a way that someone can move forward rather than getting into a system of going to high school, going to college, which is fine. And I recommend that as well. But if you have a very clear idea and a pathway and you surround yourself by mentors and tutors and everyone else to give you an education, unlike what is typically available out there, this is just a great inspirational story. And I am excited to hear more about it.
Yeah, I think we got to get Harper on the podcast, Harper Moss.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great story.
We'll probably get her parents' permission and get a permission slip signed.
Right.
But that's all good.
So one of the things that relates all these stories together and is very much related to who we're about to talk to on today's episode is these are all startups. Startups need support. And we here in New York City are lucky to be part of this growing ecosystem of people and companies that support each other. Our biotech ecosystem is very dynamic. And one of the people who we're having on is someone we know very well and have been friendly with and is actually a big supporter of the New York biotech ecosystem. And that's Dr. Glennis Mehra, who happens to run NYU Langone's BioLabs.
Yeah, she's incredible. I mean, we always have great conversations with her. She is a friend in our industry. When I see her at events, we see each other, give each other a hug, we do a quick catch up. We don't get to spend as much time one-on-one because we're always out in the industry and we do see each other often. But this was such a treat to have her on the podcast because she's an entrepreneur and she's worked in consulting large businesses. She's been an angel investor. She's lived all around the world working in different industries. So she is a wealth of information. So I'm really excited for our audience to hear from Dr. Glennis Mehra.
All right, Glennis, take it away.
Dr. Glennis Mehra, welcome to the Grow Everything podcast. We are so excited to have you on today. We've been waiting forever to get you on the podcast because you are a good friend of ours.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited. This is a great way to kick off February.
Yeah, kicking off February.
That's right.
Awesome.
So, Glennis, you are the director of BioLabs at NYU Langone. Could you share with our audience what your vision is for fostering innovation within the biotech startups you support? And then it'd be great to hear examples of the types of biotechs your community has.
Okay. So I would say the main thrust of what we do or the value of what we do is actually helping companies focus on execution. So we don't get on their cap tables. We don't provide acceleration programming. We focus on the actual work of de-risking whatever they're trying to create in the world, getting to their milestones as quickly as possible, increasing their valuation so they can efficiently raise. That's the nuts and bolts of what our operations actually focused on. And the way that looks and feels is we provide millions of dollars of equipment. We provide a community that's supportive, that's diverse, to help them discover and accelerate their discovery and to make their teams feel comfortable. Our site is actually designed with recruitment of talent in mind. So we have lots of meeting spaces, convening spaces, spaces for people to take a break and press pause if they get too stressed and to keep going ultimately, because what's being endeavored in this site is really important for the future of humanity. I tell people not to brag, but we do curate our companies. And if everything here works, we'll all be living longer with better quality of lifestyle in a more sustainable environment. And it's a great thing to get up every morning and try to make that a fruition.
This is amazing. Now, you do have some academic chops in your background, but you've also been an entrepreneur. How have those experiences shaped your approach to leading this biotech incubator in New York City?
I have to say this experience to be at the helm of BioLabs at NYU Langone is a tremendous gift. I'm really grateful for this because I get to use the entire tasting menu of my experience. And this has been rare throughout my career. So coming out of academia, working in tech transfer, being a recovering founder of an early stage company myself, and also being a strategy consultant, both in the M&A and innovation development space, I get to use all of it. And I still don't believe that I have a role in which this entire suite of experience that seems so random to me in the past gets to create value for this community. I think particularly what I love utilizing is those analytical chops that I acquired through academia. I went to Columbia at a time where we had 3 Nobel laureates in my program. I come out of the neurobiology and behavior program, and there was a lot of FOMO. I think most of the students and postdocs had not just FOMO, but also imposter syndrome. So we learned a lot. We were just grasping at knowledge from every avenue we could. Then we actually started being really ambitious on what we could create in the world. And that ambition actually has led to so much in terms of the risk I'm willing to take in terms of career moves. And I try to impart that culture here with this community. So learn as much as you can, even if it's not related to your core competency or your core field of study or the work for your company. Try to engage in and absorb as much, then also take lots of risk and make a big impact. It's all about big impact. We're not all going to be Nobel laureates, but at least we're going to substantively move the needle one way or another in this world. It's wonderful being in New York because this is an environment, this is a city where it demands no less.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just hearing about your background and knowing you over the years, it's clear that you are the perfect person to lead BioLabs at NYU Langone. And just hearing about the specific challenges you had to overcome while being a student, while being an entrepreneur, I feel like the whole concept of imposter syndrome is felt by a lot of scientists as they take on this entrepreneurial journey because they don't have an MBA. Usually that's what's on people's minds. But that the fact that you have pinpointed that, it'd be great to learn more about how you bring that into programming and as a resource. You also mentioned a little bit about the core facilities that you have there, the instrumentation. So how does this all work together to really help the resident startups at BioLabs?
Yeah, I think jumping off the theme of imposter syndrome, I think with imposter syndrome, there's this tendency to not admit your own ignorance or the boundary of your knowledge, paired with an assumption that you need to know everything and you need to be able to do everything. What I try to bring to this role is humility and grace in terms of being very transparent with the limits of my knowledge and my ability, but also understanding the limits of the abilities and knowledge of other people. By leaning into that, you have to ask for help. You have to ask for support and you have to go out and seek knowledge. And I think by encouraging that, displaying that in my way of being and doing every day, I'm hoping that it's a way to model for all of the founders and other members of our community. So in realizing, okay, you have this big experiment to do, rather than figure it out, go to the core facility and have an expert there help you navigate. That actually requires understanding that you likely will not succeed initially. It's more efficient to go to the expert and a core to do it. And also it's more efficient in terms of capital. It starts with an understanding, okay, I am not going to be able to learn this, though I can, given enough time. But I think founders generally tend to realize within the process, like a few years, that, okay, let me stick to my lane and let someone else take care of other things. And I've got to watch my capital. I think a lot of it is just dealing with your imposter syndrome and understanding the drivers of it and overcoming it.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that, because I think all of us have some imposter syndrome to a certain level. But I think when you put yourself into that founder role, especially if you're like a PhD and you're coming out of academia, that type of fakery, which it's not, it can be very challenging. But let's talk about challenges a little bit, because all biotech entrepreneurs face significant challenges. What's your opinion in terms of like, what's the biggest challenge they face and how do you help overcome those?
Capital and people. Someone should write a song about it.
We know who, by the way.
Capital and people. Here we go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So we've been in a roller coaster of funding and the availability of liquidity or exits in the market. 2023 started things off and it was painful. And I think one of the silver linings from that experience, 2023, 2024, when funds were dried up, especially for this early stage in which we host, when funds dried up, I kept telling myself and my team, we are actually going to witness the emergence of better founders. Because when there isn't scarcity and you can do anything you think of, I think there's a laziness in the system. There's a lack of discipline. It's a better word, lack of discipline in the system, in the founders, etc. So with scarcity, what we're now seeing are people being more creative, more judicious in where they put their resources, more ambitious actually in how they're projecting their companies. I think it's a tremendous, tremendous thing. It's a big challenge, but I think we are seeing founders rise more and more to the occasion. The other challenge, what I'm seeing is, again, because of scarcity of resources, companies have to decide very carefully if to make that hire and who to hire, because you now just can't hire 2 FTEs and hope for the best. That decision has to matter and count and work first time around. That's why New York is a great place, because we have these amazing institutions that are great at curating talent. I don't think anywhere else in the world has the density of such high wattage academic institutions that are tough. They're all tough to get into. Like even CUNY and City University are very rigorous in the education and the work that they put into their students. I think what you get in New York is a type of individual and a curation for work ethic and for academic standards that's unlike anything else I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. There's the density of talent in New York City, but also being creative when you have limited resources. It's something Karl and I were talking about in the previous episode. We were just talking about the whole DeepSeek thing and how they may had limited resources and were able to create a more efficient algorithm. But then we also were talking about, I know that you have lived in India for a number of years and you were an entrepreneur in India. And so you might be familiar with the concept of jugaad, the concept of making something meaningful with very limited resources. So necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So here we are. Yeah. And you have these entrepreneurs at BioLabs, and some of them are resource constrained. So how do you encourage them to explore new ideas, some interdisciplinary approaches to the work that they're doing?
So they don't have time for exploration. They only have time for decisions. And usually there's an inflection point where if something isn't working, it's not working. And you've got to decide what to do. And that decision, usually as a founder, you don't have time for exploration. What's wonderful about being in an environment like this is that you just acquire knowledge and information by osmosis, by proximity, by networking, so that when it comes time to pivot, there's a background that you have. So if you're a diagnostic company and your neighbors talking about ADCs or talking about siRNAs or talking about some other modalities, you already have a foundational knowledge, not because you were exploring, but you just happened to be there, just soaking up that conversation so that when it's time for you to make a decision, there's somebody to go to ask questions, number one. And number two, you have some basic knowledge. And we've seen this time and time again. And it's one of the great advantages of, I think, being at an incubator and being in a vibrant innovation community like this.
I love the founder to founder mentorship and collaboration and interactions. In my previous life, I was also an entrepreneur, and I found that to be just so much more meaningful because they were in it with me. It's excellent to see that camaraderie when you have a space like BioLabs to be able to, like you're saying, just osmosis, being the vibe, the hive mind that happens. Yeah. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example where we have founder circles and we have companies, as I mentioned, a very diverse community. So we have companies in the therapeutic space, we have companies who are in consumer products, sustainability, etc. And they all get around, not all of them, but a good majority chunk of them, usually every other month or so. And there's something on topic. Usually there's an ask and a give, and it's usually around capital raise and people opening up their networks. But there's also conversations about approaches with the FDA, when to start that conversation. How many times should you be approaching the FDA? Where should you have your clinical trials? And so you have people who are just starting in the room, listening to those conversations. They have nothing to say. They're just there. But that's impacting how they're approaching the world. They're thinking, okay, how do I design this clinical trial? How do I design my drug to make sure that a clinical trial will work, to make sure that that patient population is very clean, that there's a biomarker, et cetera, already in place. That, I think, is tremendous. And it's why I think we're very successful through all of the upheavals the past few years. We have not lost a lot of companies, only a handful.
Hi, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Messaging Lab, the force multiplier for biotech. Your biotech company is making the world a better place. You know that, we know that. But does the world? There's a big reason why some biotech companies attract investors, sign up customers, and get attention. That reason is strategic communications. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling narratives. And we have done that for the most successful biotech companies across healthcare, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice, visit messaginglab.com to explore how we can elevate your story and grow your business.
Yeah, I think what Erum is talking about, what you're talking about, having different types of people, different types of founders and teams around each other is something that I think many people understand is a benefit. I think big companies try to manufacture that kind of collaboration, but it's generally very difficult to do because you're hiring people that are supposed to fill certain types of roles. And no matter how vast your organization is, people do stay focused within their roles. But biology is so incredibly vast. There's so many problems that we can use biology to solve. And you were talking about these interdisciplinary approaches, and you were lucky because you have these people who are around each other all the time. Then on top of that, you add New York City into it. And you've discussed how New York City is so good about this kind of thing. So I'm curious if you could share some success stories that have come out of BioLabs. What's the magic that happens?
Yeah, so there are lots of success stories. I think one of the great examples of this magic working is we've got a company, Immuni, which was a unicorn, and they were going through their raise sitting next to one of our other smaller companies, which is a consumer product company. I'm not going to give the names, but a company raising $200 million sitting next to a company who's raising $2 million is just... Imagine the exchange and the impression and the learnings that happens in that context. And the other thing is we had Immuni and Helena cohabitating in the incubator at the same time. So Immuni actually focused on sequencing immune antibodies from immune cells. And Helena actually focused on producing breast milk that had immunoequivalent antibody representation. So it's biosynthetic breast milk, and they wanted to make sure that the antibodies that the mother provided to the baby was in the breast milk that they were making. So can you imagine these two companies, one that's actually collecting the world's largest repository of immune information, sitting next to one who's trying to create a synthetic form of breast milk that could potentially utilize that information? That's when I think magic happens. And both of those companies have gone on and graduated successfully. And I think rocking and rolling still to this day.
Yeah, I love that story. Just having companies, because again, the core of BioLabs, these companies are leveraging biotechnology to some degree. So there's a commonality between them. And of course, they have that shared language. I've seen it happen. I mean, we have participated in some of BioLabs seminars and networking. We came in there for a strategic communications workshop, which was really cool. I mean, I think the companies that were there were very interested because a lot of the founders either were very just business oriented or very technical oriented. And we brought this, hey, look, let's just talk about what the go-to-market is. Can you tell us a little bit more about how your seminars and how you think about seminars and networking events to bridge the gaps and accelerate the development of your resident companies?
Yeah, so we have two types of events, what we call ecosystem events and then internal events. The ecosystem events are a way for the wider New York community to become more aware of our local community here in this building, but also to amplify New York and to bring attention to New York and the needs and identify needs and resources and trends, etc. The internal events are something that we do with extreme care because, as you know, New Yorkers, our communities, no exception, are really busy. They do not pause. If it's boring, they're not going to want to attend. And getting people to press pause, focus up, there's got to be significant value. So the events that we do start with, okay, what's the value? Why are we doing this? Who is going to appreciate? Is there going to be critical interest or critical mass of interest? We have happy hours, etc., that facilitate people interacting. We do paint and sips. We do just fun things to get people talking and exchanging ideas and meeting each other. So it starts with creating opportunities for one-on-one interactions and introductions. Then there's the structured programming, which you guys have generously given your time to. So there's pitch practices. Every founder needs to practice. Raising never ends, and you just have to keep at it. And if you are humble enough to say, hey, I can get better, you join one of these pitch practices. For the programming that we did with Messaging Lab, I think they all were very clear there's room for improvement. And because we're casual, there's no judgment. Everyone, because we've modeled being humble, being vulnerable, being transparent, I think people feel comfortable. And when you're comfortable, you say, hey, I need help. And so we provide content when residents say, hey, they need help. So that could be trying to figure out how to find SBIRs, how to navigate finding consultants for SBIRs, who are top consultants, navigating NIH, like, I don't know what to do, and them admitting they don't know what to do. So it really starts there. And then figuring out, okay, what's the programming? What are the panels? Who are the individuals that will be right to impart the information and bridge this gap, that knowledge gap that they have?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Every time I go to a BioLabs event, I'm impressed by the people and the programming. I'm super happy that we've been a part of it. But let's talk a little bit about this concrete jungle where dreams are made of, the city where if you can make it here, people love you everywhere. What are the challenges of doing a biotech startup in New York City? You've talked a lot about like the positives. You've got these incredible academic institutions that I think a lot of people don't even realize. And we also have the biggest, when you combine us with New Jersey, we've got the biggest life sciences workforce in the country. You know, opportunities and challenges. What do you see, Glennis?
It's expensive.
Yeah.
We can just call it for what it is. But at the same time, it's always been expensive.
Always, yeah. But people still make it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because of that, it curates for people who take financial risk and who take risk. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I think our founders are taking a lot more risk in New York than elsewhere. And what we need is to convince investors that risk is a smarter risk because it leads to bigger success, better success, etc., and more impact. I think that's the main challenge of New York. I think every other thing, we've got solutions. We've got solutions. I can't think of any other problem. Traffic, we've got a solution. Subway sucks. Mass transit sucks. There's a solution. Now they're thinking about commuting, which I guess is the other thing New Yorkers complain about. But just cost of real estate. Actually, cost of talent, I think we're still below the other major markets. So in that regard, there is advantages here. But it's primarily cost of space. Space is limited here.
Yeah, I mean, what do you say to people when they think of New York City and biotech that there's not enough room or lab space? I mean, obviously we are part of the same team.
Otherwise.
Yeah, we know otherwise. But what do you say to that? Because I feel like people come here like, oh, you can't grow a biotech company in New York City. Or New York City's not a good place for that.
You can. We have tons of space. It's the cost of the space. I think if we come down to it, I wish I had a magic wand to just subsidize everybody, hint, hint.
Yeah.
That's
We would like to do that too, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there are some incentives for biotech startups in New York City.
There are quite a lot. So we're in the Startup New York accredited space. So our companies get a tax holiday from city and state payroll and sales tax, and that's huge. That's almost 10%. And it's a great recruiting tool for most of our companies who utilize that program. So there are significant incentives. And I think there's a green light project from the city. The state has grants. It's just a matter of helping residents navigate and helping early stage companies who want to be in New York navigate those programs. And it's proximity to money. So there's need for money, but there's also closer proximity to money as well.
Totally. Yeah, I would say generally being in New York, everybody comes here for one reason or another. You just can't avoid the Big Apple. And that proximity to money makes a big difference. We might not have the venture ecosystem that maybe Boston or San Francisco has for biotech, but we have everything else that follows that. And everybody is going to come here at some point for that.
So one of the things that's really interesting about New York is that there's many things interesting, but one of the things I'm really excited about is what happened in 2023 when traditional, what they say, smart money or professional money were going to safe shores and not really engaged with our community here. We opened up avenues into the angel network, and that actually produced quite a lot of results. And most of our companies during the past 2 years have been sustained by angels. Want to talk about proximity to money? We have the density of high net worth individuals that's unrivaled, I think, anywhere else in the US. So it's a great, great place if you want to lean on angel funding, lean on impact funding, philanthropic dollars, etc. New York is a place to be.
Yeah. And also for branding and coolness. I mean, Manhattan's cool.
Oh, yeah.
Brooklyn's cooler. We all know that.
Long Island City.
Oh, wait, what?
Up and coming. The new Soho.
Oh my God. That's rich, Glennis. That's stretching
We're moving to Long Island City.
I know.
All I'll say to that is there is no better place to build a brand, which means there's no better place to build a company. So if you're going to start a biotech company, this is the place to do it.
Yeah. And I have to say, we should open up the umbrella because I think a lot of my conversation focused on therapeutics, but under life science and the biotech umbrella, there's a huge scope, and therapeutics and drug discovery is just a very small part of it. And I think actually the rest of what's under that umbrella, I think would be better to be in New York. Has more impetus, more motive and value is in New York for them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely want to touch on that some more too, because we've been talking a lot about business and startups, how we can grow these companies. But let's talk a little bit more about the science side. So you have a background in molecular biology. You've done research in molecular biology. How do you see some of the principles being applied in today's biotech startups? What type of biology are you starting to see that's really exciting to you?
So I love that people are leaning more into the enormity of the problem of biology. Before, no disrespect to people and small molecules, but I feel like the small molecule approach was like when you win the lotto. Biology is so complex and is like a one-hit wonder that people try so hard to replicate. What's nice with now a lot of the new modalities, you've got the biologics, You've got cell therapies and you've got gene therapy, etc. in the mix. I think those modalities are more leaning into the complexity of nature. And because the modalities are more complex, their targets are more complex, you can now have antibodies that are chimeric such that they can anchor one thing, wait for an activator, and move things around. If that activator is present, then you can remove the drug, have the patient stop taking it, and that antibody just stops working. Just these amazingly elegant solutions to big, big problems, starting with the understanding that it's a big problem, that it's a multi-player problem, that it's not just one target by its lonesome floating around wreaking havoc that needs to be stopped. I think the oversimplification of biology has come to an end. And as we're embracing the complexity, in comes AI. And so I'm just really, really excited to see what the next few years brings. It's going to be a lot more work for everybody. Everyone thinks, oh, AI is going to kill jobs. I don't think so. I think we're just going to have more opportunities, more things to test, and more shots on goal that we have to take.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because my thesis has been biology continues to be this black box. We know so little. AI is going to help us uncover that. But then it's like a virtuous circle in that what we learn from biology in turn will influence what we are able to do and how we design future AI systems. So I think that there's a lot to learn and a lot to do. This week, the big news that we touched on was this whole DeepSeek news from China that these guys developed this AI model based on low computation infrastructure. That struck me as a huge opportunity for drug discovery and for just new approaches to biology. You don't necessarily need these humongous computational cores that are being developed. The clever, smart people are going to go in there with things that are maybe more biological than AI.
Yeah. So my weekend activity is going to be trying to figure out what's the underlying innovation that happened there. So how can they do it? Because one of the things that people don't appreciate, I don't know if they appreciate, but I have to keep reminding people that AI is not just language models. It's a whole host of other things. And what I think is the challenge is translating what you do in a language model to these other areas. And so with molecular biology, biology in general, you're dealing with small molecules, large molecules of all different types, temperature, pressure, magnetic fields. And now we have the quantum realm also supposedly acting.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it's just, hold on, let's take a beat.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my mind's been spinning lately. Our commentary from last week's episode or a couple weeks ago, I just need to take a beat. It's just too much. Or maybe just a more elegant example of all of it coming together. And I do think that will be in our biology realm to see it all happen, come together. Because then I think it will help us wrap our head around the convergence and then the application of all of these technologies.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot to do. And maybe we'll see robust solutions in our lifetime. But I just focus on the here and now. There's still so much to do. And I appreciate all the efforts and the new advances. But
the here and now becomes irrelevant every minute.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. Because we're talking about DeepSeek right now. It's probably completely over by the time this airs.
Oh, yeah. When did OpenAI come out?
I mean, it's been around for a while, but I think the OpenAI ChatGPT moment really was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember when all the podcasts, everybody in their predictions for 2023 were just on it. AI would be everywhere, doing everything, etc.
Yeah. And then when OpenAI was actually open, when it was open source, then it became closed AI. So maybe DeepSeek will become closed. I don't know. I mean, this is the thing. It's all someone's decision. So.
Yeah, champagne problems.
Yeah, champagne problems. So let's talk about, you deal with a lot of different entrepreneurs. People are aspiring to be biotech entrepreneurs. We talk to them all the time. What advice do you give to these entrepreneurs that are interested in taking their scientific discoveries and trying to turn them into viable businesses?
Make sure you know who your competition is. So we get a lot of inbound. We go to pitch events. I'm sure you've seen this as well. And you start to have deja vu all over again.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wait, don't they know that there's somebody else they should talk? And someone should decide who should bow out because there isn't room for two hat makers in town. The really interesting thing is that discovery happens where they're with contemporaries. This has been happening in the history of humanity. If you've made some wonderful discovery, someone else likely has, you've got to identify what is it that you're going to add to your platform, to your special sauce that will be next to impossible for anyone else to replicate easily. And sometimes it's just first mover advantage and just having the hubris and the grit to say, okay, I'm likely first mover and I will power through. But you've got to pay attention to the competition. I've seen many companies. And just also realize that the glory is proportional to the work. It's hard work, it's lots of risk, and you've got to be ready, committed to that and keeping your eye on why. A lot of people go into startup world saying that, well, I want to help people. I want to help cure cancer, stop suffering, etc. I know that's not true in most cases, I suspect. And I think being honest that if you're in it for the money, say you're in it for the money. You don't have to tell anyone, but just be honest with yourself and just keep your eye on the prize. Sorry, I told you there seems to be a theme here.
Yeah. Money, money, money.
Yeah, and just keeping your eyes, just being very goal-oriented and goal-focused personally on your personal goals, because that will help you make decisions and navigate and pivot and turn. It's the companies and the founders, at least in my experience, who don't have an anchoring and an honest anchoring that tend to waver and not make decisions quickly and efficiently. And decisions have to be made quickly and efficiently because things will not turn out the way you want. Experiments will fail, efforts will fail, people will fail, and you've got to be able to adapt and iterate. And if you don't have a solid goal, you don't have clear milestones, that iteration will be more like flailing rather than a focused drive.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Make decisions quick, be as smart as possible, differentiate yourself. That's one of the things that from a messaging lab side, we do biotech business communications. We're always like, how do you differentiate and position yourself? That's the number one thing. And you can't be everything for everyone. That's just not going to work because then where are we? What are we going to do? What's the message? Who are we going to go after? So it is such a powerful message. And it's like one of those things where you might think you're differentiated because doing something different, but maybe not. Maybe it's not as different as it needs to be. If you, again, take a look at the market and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And so that's great advice.
Yeah, and especially in medtech and in some synthetic biology, because anyone can clone, everyone's got the sequences at their fingertip. So putting 2 and 2 together or 2 and 2 and 6 together, other people can do that. So what's unique to you? If it's first mover advantage, great. But if it's not, as they say, God help you.
Yeah. That's great advice. So with that, I also wanted to ask, we were talking about the acceleration of technology, how biotech companies are growing, especially with the help of BioLabs. But how do you envision the future of biotech entrepreneurship evolving, considering all of that? And what role will BioLabs at NYU Langone play in that journey, or BioLabs in general?
I'll break it down a bit. So I'll talk about BioLabs in general. So with BioLabs, it's fundamentally about providing the resources for execution and building a robust community that can then leverage itself so that where the sheer scale of the network brings benefits. So right now we see that in our marketplace platform. So there's significant discounts. Residents or anyone in any biolabs gets one invoice rather than multiple invoices every month. Because of the scale of it, we actually get really good pricing from many vendors, and there are thousands of vendors in this platform. So I think I envision in the future biolabs just scaling more and bringing more entrepreneurs in the community and us refining and trying to add value, not just with our execution platform, lots of the equipment, technical support, training, and all of that, but also what I hope is in the future, adding these other things that make being a startup founder, being an entrepreneur sometimes burdensome. So hopefully regulatory, financing, talent acquisition, etc., just bolting on modules and resources for that. Right now it's provided, but in an informal manner. Hopefully in the near future, we can formalize some of those networks that we create for our residents. Two things I think can happen. I think we're going to have more of a world of have and have nots, and it's going to be more stark. So you will have companies that fall within an algorithm. I foresee the VC world and capital actually focusing more on using digital and algorithmic tools to predict success and utilizing their well-established networks. There'll be more VC spinouts. There'll be more founders and companies that are selected using that process. Everyone else will essentially have to survive on what's left over in terms of capital. It's going to be tighter for those companies. But what I see is, again, with the theme of scarcity emboldening big changes and dramatic decisions, I think it will create amazing founders and amazing companies that leapfrog and create new in ways that we haven't seen before. So I think the entrepreneurial experience would be either you are lucky enough to be tracked. Actually, I wouldn't say create a disparity of luck, but I would say either you're tracked within that professional money world or you'd be hustling, frankly, to focus on raising capital and also trying to execute at the same time. That's not going to be easy. In terms of resources available, I think AI is going to help everybody accelerate really quickly. You can have an idea, map it out, test it in silico, and a lot of this is already happening. You can build tools for yourself now rather than relying on other people if you have the coding background. I assume there'll be more entrepreneurs, and I assume that things will be accelerating faster for the entrepreneurs in terms of execution to the finish line or commercialization.
I completely agree with you. And I think what's exciting about what you just said, of course, we could look at entrepreneurs' ideas that are tracked or spun out of VCs versus the people who have to bootstrap and fight for scraps. I think that is going to drive a creativity, just like we were saying with this DeepSeek thing. What can you do on Pentium chips versus NVIDIA chips? What are you going to be able to do when it comes to drug discovery on a gaming laptop versus needing to have the NYU computing cluster? And sure, the VCs are going to be the ones who are calling the shots, but then there's going to be a lot of room for these innovators who actually do things differently and are going to be much more disruptive if that's the direction we go. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I am too. And I'm seeing it in real time now. So really, really excited.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Glennis. I'm so happy that you came on to the Grow Everything podcast. We've been waiting to get you on because we've been seeing you do your thing at BioLabs and all the other events, fighting the good fight, helping all the biotech startups win here in New York City. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I'm really optimistic and excited because I truly do believe if our community gets this right, it's going to be an amazing impact on the world. And thank you for doing what you guys do, because I know everyone thinks, oh, communication is just open your mouth and words come out. And no.
That's right. That's all it takes.
There's millions of words. You got to mine for the right ones.
Yeah.
Oh, that should be your tagline.
Wow. All right. Let me write that down. See, you guys are hearing it live. This is all happening live. Ideation.
Yeah.
All right, Glennis. We will probably see you next week somewhere.
Yeah, I'll probably see you tonight.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And thanks.
Erum, what did you think of this interview?
I loved it. Everyone got a chance to see our rapport with Glennis. She's, again, a wealth of knowledge, knows the New York biotech ecosystem in and out because she lives and breathes it, bringing people together, providing the real resources that are needed. Yes, a lab space is important. Yes, funding is important and all the things in between. But we also need a mentorship. We need to know the realities of starting a business. And Glennis and BioLabs bring that extra level of support. Be like, look, things are going to be challenging. We'll help you with some of this, but talk to your founders. Let's create a space where founders can come together and talk about the challenges of starting a biotech company. I love that because at Messaging Lab, we also work across the biotech space where it's not just biopharma, but it's bioindustrials, biomaterials, and Glennis also lives in that space. So we're able to share learnings from the different worlds with each other because fundamentally, we're looking at biology as a technology, whether it's applied to human health or whether it's applied to the environment or climate resilience, which we'll keep beating that drum of climate resilience. We think it's super important, especially as we watch the news. But in the end, Glennis, wow. What did you think? You've known Glennis for some time.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, you and I at Messaging Lab, we've done several webinars or in-person classes at New York BioLabs where we've gone in to train the CEOs of these companies on how to tell a story, how to prepare yourselves for investors, and the kinds of things that we do at Messaging Lab when we're not doing this podcast. And Glennis is very supportive of the teams, and she understands that they do need outside resources, and we're lucky to be one of those. But she's also very much aware of this ecosystem that exists in New York City, not just at BioLabs, because companies do rent a space, but then they can outgrow the space and they need to go to something bigger. And we're lucky that there is a lot of those spaces here in New York City. So Glennis is an integral part of that. She's a wealth of knowledge, and she's someone who is really worth getting to know no matter what stage of company you're at, because if she can't help you, she's going to know someone who can.
Yeah. And BioLabs is a great organization. They are nationwide, but the BioLabs at NYU Langone, which is where Glennis is taking the helm of that chapter, I guess you can call it that. And great space, wonderful events. We'll put their website in the show notes so you can keep tabs on them. If you're an entrepreneur, I would recommend you consider BioLabs and be part of that network. They're just super supportive, and it will be a launch pad for any organization that's looking to grow their business.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We love doing this podcast. If you have any questions, please let us know. We do have a hotline. The number is in the show notes. We love hearing from our listeners. We love that you get in touch with us. We do get a lot of interaction on LinkedIn, which is always interesting and welcome. We love our community and we love connecting people and hearing from you. So please do drop us a line. Like I said, the number is in the show notes. Otherwise, find us on LinkedIn, in social media. And that's the pod.
Nice.